Welcome to Tech Leader 360.
We were able to convince Bill Gates.
Effective leaders understand the weight of what their leadership is, but they don't recognize it in themselves.
In my experience, stories change culture.
Why are you going to all these Muslim countries? Are you a drug smuggler?
And there was an entrepreneur there that was talking about product market fit.
What made you to leave the Microsoft?
I was doing well at Microsoft.
Can you talk about leadership experience in nonprofits?
Leadership happens top down, side to side, bottom up.
Do you empower your staff or do you micromanage your staff?
It would be foolish.
All of these people, whether it's Satya Nadella or Bill Gates or Steve Ballmer, Paul Moritz, I mean, they're just endless number of people who kind of gave you time. And with that time, you actually learn things.
Leaders have built their own stories. Tomorrow, you can build your own story. Use Tech Leader 360 as your reference tool to build your leadership journey.
If you are a software engineer or a data scientist or a solution architect or any IT professional, this is for you. And I'm super inspired to see your experience towards to the data, and as a women leader, you have worked in Microsoft more than 23 years, and then you moved into Databricks. I wanted to see your experience from a Microsoft pretty long experience. What is your experience?
Yeah, so I think I always sort of tease my career started with Apache helicopters in the U.S. Army and now has come full circles to Apache Spark at Databricks with a quick 23-year stop at Microsoft in between there. But my experience with Microsoft actually started in the U.S. Army. I was working on the electrical and weapon systems on the Apache helicopters in Korea. Just shy of the DMZ, right inside the Royal Korean Air Base. And we got this brand new thing called Office, and nobody knew how to use it. And so they were like, you're the girl, you go figure out the computer part and enter in all the data into Excel. And so I said, absolutely, I would love to learn how to do that. So that was my first experience with data, was creating a database in Excel that essentially tracked all of the Apache helicopters, repair, maintenance records, part ordering, etc. And I really, really just sort of loved this Office product. At the time, it was like a whole suite. It was the first time that Microsoft had pulled something together. And I said, I'm going to go work for Microsoft. And everybody sort of laughed at me. I was like a 20-year-old kid. And they said, you'll never be able to do that. You dropped out of college. You didn't finish school. And I said, you just wait and see. So I kept working on my own, learning technology. I got out of the Army. I did my MCSE certification.
Oh, yeah.
As soon as I got out, that was sort of how people were landing inside the company. And at the time, I was doing hardware repair, actually, at Radio Shack. And I did my MCSE courses at night. I got a call on a Friday afternoon to come interview because Microsoft was hiring vendors or contractors for IE5 support on Windows 3.1 and Windows 95, and they needed to hire people relatively quickly. I said, I don't know. I have a 2-year-old at home. I'm watching her by myself. My husband was still stationed. My husband at the time was still stationed in Kentucky, so I was here in the Seattle area by myself. They were like, bring her with me. Bring her with you. It's like, she's 2. Are you really, really sure you want her in an interview? No, it's fine. It'll be great. So we brought her into the interview for Microsoft. I gave her a Coke and a cookie. Please don't pass judgment. At that time, it was okay to feed your 2-year-old sugar. And so I just sat her there. As we went through the layers of the ODI model, my daughter then promptly dumped her Coke into the laptop case, the briefcase of the interviewer from Microsoft. I said, there's no way I got this job. It's just not going to happen. And they made the offer. By the time I hit the parking lot, they were so desperate for people to come in and do that support. And it was the best 23 years, I think, of my lifetime. Microsoft was such an amazing company, amazing opportunity. I definitely learned a lot under the Bill Gates era. We were really trying to drive a PC in every desktop. I worked really hard on the technical side, rose up as a technical lead on the Windows platform. On the consumer side, I then moved into enterprise because Microsoft was just trying to do that consumer to enterprise conversion. Oh, gosh, I feel really old telling this story, right? Now everybody looks at it and says, who doesn't do enterprise? But at the time, we were trying to get into enterprise. So I went into a role called a technical account manager, essentially primarily focused on automotive companies, on acting as their liaison. How do I make them successful with all Microsoft products? So,
I see.
How do we do that? Realized I worked at a technology company and I didn't realize how we actually wrote software. So I decided to move from tech into business. And I went into a couple of roles around sales excellence, trying to help the organization create global strategies and structures. And that was where I first landed into data, like officially into data. Excel doesn't really count anymore, I think. So I had a team of data analysts, and we were pulling internal and external data sources, aggregating them, and then putting them together for each of the regional global leadership as well as the board to say these are the things, feedback that we're getting from enterprise customers on what's working and what's not working, and what do we need to change inside of Microsoft around processes, people, structures, licensing models, go-to-market, product constructs, et cetera. So it was a fabulous role, I think, to really learn about the complexities of how do you as an organization transform using data. That was under sort of Bill and Steve, and then when Satya came in, then there was really a lot of focus at the company about how are we going to transform as an organization and leverage data to do that. I then landed in Azure Data Engineering, which is the Synapse, Purview, Fabric teams, which are a fabulous group of guys and ladies working on some great product and technology. Really learned the tech a lot better. Not as well as any of them do, I think. They're just absolute geniuses, but had a really, really good time as the chief of staff, which is essentially like a COO function. So got to help grow that organization from several hundred to several thousand as we were exponentially hiring to grow. And so I learned a lot about operations and processes and how to actually create frameworks that were data-driven to help an organization grow at that sort of hyper scale. And then they offered me the job as Chief Data Officer in Microsoft UK. So I moved to London right at the start of the pandemic. Not a great time to do an international transition, but it was a great opportunity. UK created the first Chief Data Officer. I essentially got to help write the job description. Half of my time was focused on customers. How do I help them be successful with data and data platforms and data transformation? And then how do I help Microsoft UK be more efficient and effective when it came to using data? How do I make sure that everybody across the CEO's leadership team was thinking about data in their day-to-day jobs? So, but then you sort of hit 23 years and you start to look back and say, oh my gosh, what do I do now? What's the next step? And Databricks came knocking. So they're an amazing company. We had a first-party agreement with Microsoft that still exists. And so I was familiar with the technology. I think they are a fabulous organization that innovates at a pace that I've never seen. And so it was super exciting to get the opportunity to take all of those lessons I learned inside of Microsoft, and now how can I help Databricks customers leverage Azure Databricks as well as Databricks on AWS and GCP to be successful when they really comes to transformation. Can I take some of the lessons I learned at Microsoft and doing it and executing against it and help them with Databricks products do the same thing?
Yeah, I'm curious to ask you one simple question, because you said very initial of the conversation, you said quick 23 stop, 23 years of stuff, quick. So what was the biggest challenge you have solved at Microsoft that you can take, wow, this is a aha moment? So what do you talk about? Can you talk about some of your great experiences at Microsoft?
Yeah, I think my biggest aha moment was that true transformation is about people, right? It's not about the technology. It's not necessary. It is partially about the technology, but it's not solely technology that will drive an organization for transformation. For example, I mean, Microsoft definitely went through, I don't think there's anybody here that could say Microsoft didn't go through a transformation when Satya Nadella came in as CEO. I think it's one of the greatest success stories of a legacy organization that was able to transform. And I think a lot of that was because he essentially said, we will be learn it all versus know it all. We will be data driven. And he demonstrated being data driven. And so for me, I was always, because I grew up at Microsoft on the tech side, and it's a technical company, right? It's a software company. It was very easy to connect with the engineering leaders from a technology perspective.
Right.
Oh, that can't go onto the roadmap in this, right? In this cycle, we need to defer for 6 months because of X, Y, and Z issues across Azure with other components, et cetera. The minute you try to say, we need to get all of your people to do right, to essentially submit requests for headcount, right, differently, because we're going to be data driven on how we make a headcount decision across the organization.
Yeah.
Like it just didn't. It didn't resonate with people that the processes would change as well, because everybody was so focused on the technology, and that's not a technology issue. That is an issue of, we have to get away from these legacy processes of the last person to have a conversation in the hallway with a leader gets the head count. That's not how it works if we're going to be data driven. And so getting the organization to change decades worth of processes that had grown up as people had been there for tenured periods of time. Microsoft definitely has people that have been there as long as I have. And so when you go in with 20 years, you're like, well, we've always done it that way. We've done it that way for the last 20 years. It's like, yes, and now we're going to do it different, because we're going to be data led, and we're going to be data driven, and we're going to demonstrate that to the organization. So part of it is tech, but that means you also have to enter quality data into the system. That means we're going to use it as the system of record. It is the single source of truth. It is the system that we're going to make the decisions off of. And I think that was really difficult, not just for me, but for all the leaders that I was working with on, how do we not be technology focused, and how do we think about the people and the process that it was going to take to transform the organization.
So how is your experience at Databricks? Because Microsoft is a huge $3 trillion market cap business.
Yeah.
And when you have made a transition from Microsoft to Databricks, what kind of experience that you're going through in your mind?
I think I deliberately did that move for a couple of reasons. I think the very first one was I wanted startup experience. Right, I had been at Microsoft for so long. I only knew. I love to tell people I started when I was like 12, right? Because I put in 23 years. But right, I mean, I started in my early 20s, and I knew nothing other than this big legacy, complex organization that had structure and all of this history and the ways that we did things. And yes, we were looking to change, but now there was this amazing startup with some great technical innovation that, and people laugh when I say Databricks is a startup with 7,000 employees, but to me, it's still a startup. Right? We're still able to meet customer demands and needs at a pace that I just can't see in a legacy organization. And so for me, I'm definitely getting that experience that I wanted of going into an organization where I can help create from scratch, a way to solve problems, a way to address the needs of our customers. And how do I do that not just through my experience and the things that I can bring to bear, but actually get the feedback into the product? Can we innovate on product? It was really interesting. I think we all saw sort of ChatGPT a year ago. The announcement came out in February, this year's 2024. February of 2023, we were sitting at our company kickoff in Las Vegas, and Ali's on stage talking about the entire mission and goal of Databricks Databricks was to drive simplicity. We were getting feedback from customers that the platform was complicated and difficult to use. And so we were all going to focus and drive this effort toward an iPhone type of experience for the Databricks platform to make it simpler, right? Because people had the iPhone and they were used to having a fax app and a map application, and right, all of these apps are in a single form factor and a single device. Can we drive data the same way through the Databricks platform? Great goal and objective in February, and then ChatGPT comes out. By the time we went to Data and AI Summit in June, we had like 78 product announcements of how we had integrated, including with the acquisition of Mosaic ML, but just the pace of innovation of that engineering team had come up with so much practical application of large language models inside the platform itself to be able to help customers as they were trying to figure out, how are we going to do this? How are we going to use our data, right, to do these things with large language models, to not be in a proprietary system? How do we do it with open models? How do we build our own? Do we need to build our own? And so I just think, as much as I love Microsoft, it does take them much, much longer, I think, to react sometimes to customers and customer demands and the things in the product. And so I think for me, being in a startup and seeing that almost, that pace of innovation with some product truth behind it that we can deliver for customers is phenomenal.
I think Ali has a great vision as how the Apple iPhone has been used by any consumer, whether it is a small kid or whether it is a mom or grandma.
Yes.
And similarly, if Databricks is going to be the iPhone of data, that's going to be fantastic. And let's deep dive into those kind of questions. So because as I'm a data leader, I'm also seeing a lot of challenges.
Yes.
And since you are a field digital officer, chief data and CDO at Databricks aspect of it, and you must have seen so many customer problem statements. So based on your experience, what is the biggest challenge and the industry is facing, especially around how the data is being used, managed, and how the effective data strategy is all about? And I just wanted to see how this has been evolved over the period of the time.
Yeah, I think for most of the organizations I work with, it still boils down to the fundamentals, right? I think, we have some great teams that go in and really talk about continuing to help organizations as they think about the fundamentals around their data platform, things like data quality, things like getting rid of all the silos of data that exist across the ecosystem. Lots of organizations still don't even know what data they have, right?
Exactly.
They're still trying to do things like, how can we leverage Unity Catalog to really understand what data assets we even have across the organization? I think AI has introduced a level of complexity to many organizations, because now you not only have your data assets, you have your AI assets. And so, right, you have all these data science teams that are recreating the efforts and the work that they're doing across the organization. And so you're not getting the most value out of the investments that you've made in as an organization. But I think organizations continue to struggle with not just the technology and the platform, because even customers who have all the foundations and a great Databricks platform built out, they still haven't thought about the people aspect. How do you bring the organization along on the journey? How do you really democratize data and democratize AI? How have you defined that for your organization? What does that mean? Does that mean every business user is going to be in a notebook and coding in Python? Maybe, if you're, right, if that's the business model for your organization, is that everybody has those capabilities. For most organizations, I can guarantee your finance person or your HR partner is not coding in Python to get their data assets, right? And so what does that mean for them to be democratized on data, or to leverage AI in their roles and their functions? And for that, you have to have the foundations, and that means bringing every persona in the organization along on that journey and helping them understand the capabilities of the technology and the platform that you've built, and how does that apply to their role, to their function, to their capabilities, and how they change us.
Yes. So how the Databricks is addressing these kind of issues, especially for a large enterprise? The biggest problem is going to be like a scalability and integration of multiple systems. And of course, there is also a hybrid environments and multi-cloud environment. So how do you see the unified platforms are solving these kind of problems?
So I mean, I think Databricks has always been on this journey, right? If you think about 10 years ago when Databricks was founded, it was really the lake house, right? And for everybody talks about lake house now, but when Databricks was talking about lake house 10 years ago, people didn't have any idea what that really meant. Everybody had their traditional data warehouses for their structured data. They had their lake for the unstructured data. Everybody thought the lake was going to solve everything, so they threw everything into the lake. And then you had like data swamps, so nobody really understood anymore what data was in that lake. There was no there was no sort of structure around it at all. So people weren't actually able to leverage it in any sort of BI or intelligence that you were trying to drive across the organization. So the original fundamental problem that Databricks was looking to solve 10 years ago was bridging that gap between AI in the lake and BI and traditional warehouses, and how do you create a unified way that, regardless of where you stored your data, because Databricks never wanted to be in the business of storage, right?
Correct.
The hyperscalers provide great infrastructure to be able to do that, and we weren't going to be able to do that at cost. But how do we make it so that you don't have to constantly copy your data across from cloud to cloud, or from data silo to data silo? The biggest problem most organizations still struggle with is copying of data back and forth. Every time you create a new dashboard or a new report or a new
snapshot is going to be created.
Correct. Everybody's copying off pieces of data. I remember the first time we tried to consolidate data at Microsoft, and everybody downloaded data to access databases under their desk because they were afraid that they're going to lose control. We still have those issues today, and organizations have all of these silos of data, and each of those have their own structure around them, so their own governance, their own policy. And so we were really trying to solve, how do you let the data stay in one place so that you do have that single source of truth, and then how are you going to aggregate it so that if you're a data scientist, you can interact with that data across the warehouse and the lake, or if you're a data analyst, you could also get to that same data from the data scientist, right, that the same data scientists are using. So you would get out of this argument of copies of data and then not agreeing on who had the most accurate data based on whatever point in time that you took the data. And so the entire function of the lakehouse was to break down these silos, help customers mitigate all of these separate systems that they were having to buy. They were buying a system for BI. They were buying a system for the warehouse. They were buying a system for AI, buying a system for real time and streaming, buying a system for governance. And so how do we create a platform that allowed organizations to not have to maintain all of these separate ecosystems? So we started with Delta Lake, which was essentially the layer that allowed you in open parquet format to be able to access the data. So we didn't care if it was in AWS, if it was in Snowflake, if it was in Synapse. We didn't really care where the data sat, but you wanted to be able to read it the same as you did any of your other data sets. So there was originally the Delta Lake, and then we really focused on governance, and with Unity Catalog that you mentioned earlier, right? That there was a lot of focus around, okay, now that organizations can really start to break down the silos and not have to move or copy the data, how do we now allow them to do policy enforcement? How do we allow them to do end-to-end lineage? Some of the big complex governance problems that organizations were trying to solve for. And I think now, as we wait for pending AI legislation, that type of governance, like the explainability, the transparency, and being able to track all of your data and AI assets is becoming even more critical. And so what I really appreciate about Databricks platform is it grew up out of AI. So it's not like we're trying to add it on later. It's right. We were the creators of Spark. We grew up in big data and really focus. I think all of our founders are data scientists, it feels like. And so how do we...
Berkeley,
right,
they're all from
Berkeley. Yeah,
yeah.
UC Berkeley, all PhDs. I think, right, they're all brilliant. But right, how do you now, what we solved for originally was the big data problem. It was the AI problem. And so for us, it was always about being data and AI. You could never have one and the other. And so how are we going to help bridge the gap across that? And I think that's where you continue to see investments. So things like the Mosaic acquisition last year, right, was really about how do you unlock the power of these big models? How can organizations build their own models? How do we make sure that the platform gives organizations the possibility to build models on their data, because
Right.
that's the advantage you have, is it's your data.
Correct.
The advantage is not you and my grandmother both using Chat GPT and having the exact same
Exactly.
right competitive advantage. The competitive advantage is your data. So how do we make sure that you're protecting your IP? I should probably mention, as part of my career path, I did go back to law school for my master's of law in intellectual property. So I find that part of the ecosystem just fascinating right now as we watch sort of that evolve. And that's why I think the technical platform that Databricks provides and being able to help organizations prepare for, the power of innovation of generative AI and AI on your data is just so phenomenally powerful. And it's really what gives you the advantage over everybody else across the market and across your competitive landscape. And so I think that's where we continue to see the investments from Databricks, as well as how do we make the platform smarter? So things like serverless, so that we can get you out of the job of having to turn on and turn off clusters and get everything set up to be able to do, right? How do we make sure that we're leveraging Mosaic inside the platform to help things like optimization, give you a recommendation for a better way to write a query? I think lots of people talk about copilots, but that doesn't necessarily say that based on your data, based on how you've how you're using it, the reports or the dashboards that it's feeding into, the query is optimized as effectively as it could
I
be.
see.
And an intelligent data platform can do those types of things. And so I think that's really the vision and the direction. Because when you ask about, democratizing for all personas, I do think that's the vision. The iPhone of the data platform, Ali's probably going to kill me, right? But I really do think it is that simplification.
And also, it also helps like partners like us when we go to our customers with the Databricks, the power of the table is going to be changed. As we go independently, the value is going to be much. We have to put a lot of energy to get that conversion of that customer versus having a Databricks and partners like us. So it brings more value to our customers.
My hope always is, when you talk about the build versus buy, right, is that your talent can bring to our mutual customers the power of the existing platform and then build the incremental value on top of it, as opposed to having to rebuild. It's always amazing to me when I walk into an organization and they're like, yeah, we're just going to build our own cloud hyperscale services. Like, why would you do that? Like, you have 3 options to pick from. Like, why would you? Or even multiple, I guess, if you get outside the U.S. But really invest your engineering resources and your talent on solving the specific business problems that you're looking to solve, and let Databricks and Azure Databricks or AWS Databricks sort of deliver what they're good at, right? And how can you build on top of that for incremental value?
And when it comes to the data democratization, you said a very interesting point. You said data democratization to anybody. But what is Databricks' commitment, especially for non-technical users? And the security is going to be paramount, and that's data integrity is going to be paramount. So what is the direction the Databricks is moving towards data democratization for non-technical users?
I think the first signs of that are sort of the AI BI announcement we made back in June, right? Which is essentially, you might have heard it called Genie Rooms or Data Rooms, right? It's essentially, how can any user across the business interact with the data in natural language, right? Because that's really how non-technical users want to interact. They don't want to have to learn SQL or Python and try to figure out how to actually connect to which database, and how do they even find the data set that they want to be able to access. They just want to be able to ask questions, and if they look at a report, they want to be able to drill in and ask more questions. I think I once read a statistic that an organization said that a question from their CEO on a dashboard or a report ultimately ended up costing the organization 70 man hours and over 1,000 emails, as they would go back and forth on questions from the CEO about a dashboard. We just don't have bandwidth. Most organizations don't have the manpower to be able to staff every dashboard to be able to respond to your CEO in that fashion. And so if you think about it, to have the CEO now be able to say, why are sales down in the UK for last quarter for this product line? and be able to ask it exactly that way and get, a more predictive response. That's exactly how they want to interact with it. And I think that's our vision, is with things like AI BI, how can they do that? But to do that and make sure that people are only getting access to the data that they're supposed to, that you can make sure that you're setting up the right policies so that you don't misuse the data or misshare data that shouldn't be shared with a specific user inside or outside the organization. I think that's why Unity is becoming such a fundamental part of the platform. And so it's really helping organizations that as you unlock the power and the capabilities that you have with natural language interfaces with your data platform, how do you make sure that you're putting the right governance and controls in place? And so I think that's why you're starting to see everything ties into Unity so that organizations can have that governance layer and control across all of their data and AI assets. Organization, as they get data into Databricks, it will be in Unity Catalog so that they have that built-in governance layer already. And it's not a separate product. It's fundamentally part of the platform.
Yeah. So now every organization talking about the AI initiatives, and because AI is a core strategy of the next level of innovation, right?
Yes.
So many users that I'm talking to, customers that I'm talking to, our customers. So there is lots of confusion is going on, especially from a Databricks AI initiatives aspect of it. So when we propose DBRX and something like that, there is a confusion happening. So I want you to demonstrate what exactly the Databricks AI strategies and how it is scaling those AI ML implementations. And number one. Number two, I wanted to see your experience of what is this DBRX. And in a simple layman point of view, if you can talk to our audience, both AI side as well as the DBRX and the Databricks commitment towards to the AI.
So that's a big question. Isn't
Yeah,
it? So
loaded question.
I think our commitment to AI, as I mentioned, like we started in AI, right? We were always the data and AI company from the very beginning. For me, I think the biggest we focused a lot on data. So it used to be, I love Arslan Tavakoli often says, like, we talked about we're the data and AI company, right? We would almost whisper AI. Now we're like, we're the data and AI company, right? We can do both. We've been doing both. And I think the acquisition of Mosaic ML was a huge investment into the company on how important AI was going to be for the strategy. And there's two things that acquisition solved for us. One, I've sort of talked about the intelligence inside the platform. So how do we help you do things like automate ingestion, et cetera? All of that is built on Mosaic inside the data platform so that it's not separate. But the other thing is organizations are asking, how do we build our own models on top of it? And that's essentially the Mosaic aspect. So how do you do things like ML ops or LLM ops? How do you make sure that it's built into your workflows? All of that was the Mosaic acquisition that built out that whole, built on top of the existing AI capabilities that the platform had. And I think we'll continue to make investments into that as organizations go from prompt engineering to RAG to fine tuning and whatever's next in the evolution of generative AI that organizations are looking to do. I think we continue to focus on making sure the platform can support that, because the worst thing that we think could happen is an organization has to set up an entirely separate AI platform to be able to deliver against that, because your AI is only as good as your data. And so they have to reside together, and they have to have the same policies, the same controls, the same governance, the same interfaces where possible, the same workflows, et cetera. And so how do we simplify that? I think we'll continue to make investments in that space. DBRX is a great one. I mean, it was the best LLM out there for 2 weeks, I think, right? And so I think for us, it was really about how do we push the ecosystem to realize that proprietary models were not the solution to all problems, right? I think lots of organizations continue to struggle with, particularly as you think about legislation. If you have to have transparency, all of your solutions cannot be built on proprietary models. It's a black box. You don't know what's happening inside of there. Pretty sure ChatGPT or OpenAI is not going to share with us all what are the weights and measures being used in ChatGPT. So DBRX was all about the art of the possible, right? It doesn't take millions of dollars. I think that one took a few $1,000s and a couple of engineers a weekend to sort of build it and put it together. All of the employees fed data answers and questions into there. Like we were literally being tracked on putting questions and answers into there to have the training, the pre-training data sets for it to be able to use. But I think it wasn't meant to displace any model out there. If you look at Hugging Face, the models fluctuate on almost, gosh, for a while there, it was like a war of the roses, right? As fast as things were moving and new models were coming out, and the minute you had a great model, somebody else came out with a new model, and Llama came out with a new model, and somebody else. And so I don't know that any organization will look at that and say, this is the one model that we're going to put everything into, and it's going to solve all of our business use cases. I don't know of any organization that's doing that. What you're going to do is look at things like Llama, DBRX, ChatGPT, and you're going to pick the right model to solve the right business use case while balancing the risk, right? Because you want to make sure that anything that's your IP or your proprietary data, you probably don't want to put into an open model, right? You want to be able to make, a proprietary model where you lose control of the data or that they're starting to take your data to train it on, that puts your IP or your trade secrets at risk. So you do want to use an open source model where you own the data, you own the model, you own the IP. And so DBRX was never meant, I think lots of people saw it come out and go, oh my gosh, is that either your stock ticker, right? Because everybody thought we were going to IPO, or they were like, this is now the model that's going to solve all things. And I don't think that was ever the intent. It was trying to push the ecosystem more toward open models. How do we make sure that we're driving the ecosystem as quickly as possible to respond to this revolution that was happening, and make organizations see that proprietary models were not going to solve all of their business problems.
When it comes to productionize their AI implementation, they are very skeptical. Oh no, let's not push it.
Yeah.
So what kind of a confidence that Databricks can give to the customers who can push their AI implementation to the production? So how do you bridge the gap to build that kind of a confidence?
So I think for most organizations, we also see the same thing, right? Where there's probably about 30% are making it into production at scale.
30%.
For most organizations, the limit isn't necessarily the technology. I don't mean to keep harping on it, but it goes back to people and process, right? They're concerned about hallucinations or model drift, but they haven't built into the process any human oversight, right? To make sure that there's a validation or a check and balance to make sure that those things aren't happening. And so for most organizations, when I see them start to slow down on that productionization of the AI solution, it's because they haven't thought about the other components to be able to deliver against that. Or I see organizations where they made huge investments into AI, and now the board and the CEO are sort of pulling back on funding to say, where's my return on my investment? Because you didn't move into production quickly enough, or you didn't demonstrate. And I actually just wrote a LinkedIn post about this today, this morning, because I was really sort of struggling with this in that because organizations have set these big, lofty goals for what AI was going to help them uncover, we'll be able to reduce the cost of our customer call center by 50% in 12 months. And okay, that's a great aspirational goal, but what are your milestones to get there? What does that mean? So that means for phase one, you'll aggregate all of your knowledge base articles for self-service for most of your customers to mitigate or deflect, incoming customer calls. Like set up those small measurable milestones as you look to get there, because most organizations that are only working toward the one aspirational 3-year goal, you're struggling now to show the return on any of this investment, particularly if you're still working on some of the foundations of data quality, understanding what data assets exist across the organization, breaking down some of those silos, creating the unified platform. All of that takes some level of lift where you won't see a return on your AI investment until much later. And so I think some of it has to do with that people and process and how you're communicating the transformation that the organization is going through.
So now this, you said one side platforms, unified platforms, the other side is the AI. Now, this raised me another question to ask you, because, see, people like me, they don't have time to call to the customer care and give your data and all the stuff. So I wanted to give you one relevant context, is that when I'm using my mobile app, for example, travel ticket, if I want to reach out to customer service, I never call them. Just I text them, and they basically solve my problem under 5 minutes. So that is a level of service that I'm looking forward as a customer. Even at my home, if I wanted to renew my contract for in my TV, I wanted to just do through the mobile remote device, right? So what is the commitment from a Databricks point of view to solve real-time analytics, because customers do not have any waiting, they don't want to spend time because the massive amount of data is there.
Yeah.
Enterprise has a huge amount of data, but to solve customer problem and generate more value from a competitive standpoint of view, the speed is going to be very crucial, right? So what is a Databricks commitment towards to real-time data analytics?
So the platform today supports real time, right, and streaming use cases. We have lots and lots of great examples on Databricks.com of organizations that are doing real time streaming use cases today. I think for many organizations, the problem is they still struggle to know what are those real time use cases. So you're right. For example, I think that the airline one is a great one, right? I
Yeah.
think we have some great examples with JetBlue, who are using the Databricks platform to be able to take real-time things like maintenance data, weather data, staffing data of airline staff, flight cancellations, and then they can, in real time as those things happen, leverage AI to actually reschedule customer flights, right? As opposed to you having to call in after your flight's gotten canceled and sit on hold with the 150 other people that were on the flight. This happens to me often, by the way, right? Where I have to sit on hold and try to get rescheduled on the next flight. JetBlue now has a system that's able to, in real time, actually reschedule, provide the customer, the passenger, a text to say, we were able to rebook you on this flight. Is this okay? Yes or no? So in real time, it's alleviating the calls to the customer center. It's operating in sort of all of the real time data sets. Does that mean that they need every data asset in their entire organization to be real-time streaming? Absolutely not. I think what they did a fabulous job at was making sure that they understood the use case, what were the data sets that they needed to be able to deliver against that use case, and then focusing those on real time. But today, the Databricks platform absolutely can, and we have some great examples, and we leverage some phenomenal partners to help us help customers build those things on top of the platform. Because again, right, Databricks has always sort of been in the position that we don't think real-time streaming use cases should have to reside on a separate platform or a separate ecosystem and have separate governance and have to create their own copies of the data. It should be able to operate within that unified platform.
So you have seen so many leaders and you have become a great data leader, and there are lots of leaders, they wanted to become a great leader like you. Since you are a data leader specifically and watching many customers at the field level, so what would you give suggestions to aspiring tech leaders who are aligned to data?
I think, my advice to you would be it is not a straight line or a straight path to go up the ladder or an organization. Even 23 years in one company, it was not a linear move, a promotion every time I did a job. For me, it was always about what was I going to learn? What was the next challenge that I could take on, right? The role for moving from technology to business, it was because I wanted to understand both sides of that component. Moving from business into engineering, I really wanted to understand how to build products. Moving from the US to the UK, right? It was always about, for me, taking on another challenge and learning a new capability and how to be able to deliver that. But that did oftentimes require, taking a lateral move or a step backward, like manage team, go back to individual contributor. And so I think as you think about building your capabilities and competencies, be grounded in who you are and what your superpower is that you're going to bring from role to role. What are the things that challenge you and make you get up every morning? I am so grateful for the opportunity to participate in this podcast. It's one of my favorite parts about my job is getting to meet partners and talk to customers about the amazing things that they're doing with Databricks technology. So be grounded in the things that you enjoy doing, and then think about the things, what is that next role that you want, and don't view it as a job that exists today. That CDO role in UK didn't exist until I wrote the job description, right, with the CEO. So even if the job doesn't exist today, just if you're grounded in what your superpowers are and what you want to learn and what you think you can bring to the market, go create your next role. Like, we don't even know what the next technology revolution is going to be. So many opportunities for the phenomenal leaders coming up behind, that I think you guys are just going to deliver way more amazing things than I ever was. So
Fantastic.
I'm super excited.
And since as a women leader, what are the pros and cons, and what is your view as a women leader in a corporate world?
Yeah, I think the gender thing is always a bit interesting. I think there are many times even today where I sit around the table and I'm the only non-male representation, I think, across the leadership team. I think there's lots of opportunity and passion that exists across the ecosystem. I still am actively involved in some of those communities, like the Women in Data community, the Women Leaders in Data and Analytics communities, which are specifically focused on how do we get more female representation at every level in data roles. People always ask, so I'm the mother of 4 girls, and they always say, are any of them technologists? Like, no, not a single one of them. They always sort of look at me and say, like, data is like not that important. It's like, oh my gosh, baby, do you realize how much you use data like every time you go to the grocery store and you're trying to pick Tide over Ariel detergent, right? You're using data to make those calculations. Oh, you did your workout and your menu, and you calculated your macros depending on your export of you realize that's all data, right? And so, like, trying to articulate to the next generation that you're using data whether you think so or not, and don't think of data as being STEM only. I mean, like I shared with you, I started my career on the DMZ of Korea. Like, people come into data from different ways and different directions. And so even if you aren't a traditional engineer or traditional STEM, I just think there's so much opportunity to bring these diverse perspectives. Bring your dance degree, your art degree, your liberal arts, your social sciences, your languages. Oh my gosh, some of the best data scientists are those people that came from foreign language degrees. Like, there's so much opportunity in the data space because it requires, just the practicality of translation. I think if you can translate it and get people to see the value of data sets, you'd be a great contributor to the data community. All you Databricks engineers, keep innovating, because I think we still have a long way to go, and I'm super excited to see what we do together.
Fantastic, Robin. It's such a pleasure talking to you, and I've heard. To me, I've gained a lot of experience from you, and sharing lots of wisdom is an amazing. And thank you very much for coming to our podcast. And it's a true honor for us to host you here. Thank you coming to our podcast, Robin.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.